stage is yours.
Thank you.
All right.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Thanks for having us. We get to introduce each other a little bit to start off. I'm happy to be here with Dorothy Chou, who leads the Public Engagement Lab at Google DeepMind, a team that gets to think about how do we prepare our societies for a future with AI. She also had stints at Dropbox and Uber, is an angel investor, and is trying to finish her thesis on ethics and AI at the University of Oxford.
And I have the pleasure of introducing one of my best friends, Sandro Gianella, who we met at Google early days, but has become one of the most sought-after policy executives in Europe, and went to Stripe, and is now leading policy and partnerships for Europe at OpenAI. So we thought it'd be fun to go through some of the top questions people tend to ask us when they find out we work in AI. So
let's do it.
All right. For you. So everybody says that AI is this world-changing technology. But it feels like we're just getting some document summaries and selfie videos. So what's actually going on here, Son?
I feel like getting this question after having spent the past 3 days playing around with Sora 2 that we've just released, I'm not sure I'm in the right headspace to answer the question. But I think it's an important one. I think one of the things that I've realized over the past 3 years in watching our societies adapt to these new technologies is I think it's actually a superpower of humanity to get used to these new capabilities so quickly. I mean, think about the progress we've made just in the past 3-4 years. And many of these moments, and I think once people realize what these models can do, came a bit in a playful way. You know, the first kind of ChatGPT release, people were writing poems. We certainly had a moment on image generation where people played around with it. And of course, that doesn't kind of diminish all of the very important science-focused work and productivity-focused work that people are doing. But I actually think it's not a bad thing for this technology to be a little playful, because I think it leads to have more people think about this technology. I think it reaches people. This technology, in that way, reaches people that otherwise wouldn't think about how they can use AI to make their lives better.
Well, and then you add on top of that things like our Nobel-winning system, AlphaFold, which has led to breakthroughs in plastic-eating enzymes and is being used to study protein-folding-related diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and Huntington's, to faster diagnosis of conditions like endometriosis, which affects millions of women around the world and usually takes 10 years in surgical diagnosis to prove, to even methane-free cows, which we're working on with another Nobel laureate, Jennifer Doudna, who discovered CRISPR. You know, you look at those cows that basically account for 14% of greenhouse gas emissions in the world. It's pretty foundational, and I think science is interesting because it's recession-proof. You know, there's outcomes societies actually can't live without, and so super excited about what we're basically able to do with that.
Wonderful. Our conversation reminds me of a tweet I once saw that I think I shared with you, which was, you know, OpenAI releases new model, and the comms is like, we got a new model, have fun with it. And Google DeepMind releases a model, and it's about how they've sort of observed pig farmers in Albania to create a new type of fungus to solve new diseases.
Look, I think looking at invasive fungus and how it affects the world is a pretty good investment. I can't lie.
I think that's true. Maybe the last thing I would say about this, I do think where and how capital is allocated in all of the things that we're able to build on these technologies is really, really important. And I think thinking about what are the outcomes that you're delivering, where you're really allocating your capital, I think matters. I do think we can do both AlphaFold and Duolingo-type apps that use this technology.
Yeah. So I think you're next up, Son.
I'm next up. So the other question we get a lot is, how do you know that a model is safe enough to release it to the world? How do you make this decision in the past and going forward?
I mean, when we looked at AlphaFold, for example, we wanted to make sure that we weren't incrementally adding more risk in the biology space in biosecurity. So we worked with dozens of bioethicists to just validate the release, and then we worked with a design partner called the Drugs for Neglected Diseases Initiative to make sure the quality and accuracy of the predictions were what they should be. And then finally, we released it with government. We released it with a public entity called the European Bioinformatics Institute. And we released 200 million protein structures that used to take PhDs 4 years per protein structure to actually come up with. So we basically saved the world 1 billion years of research time through that public-private partnership. But, I mean, you released your language model first, Sandro. So how did you guys figure that one out?
I think one of the things that's underappreciated in the increase of the capabilities of these models is just how much work goes into innovating on the safety of these models.
Yeah.
That goes governance structures. We were present at the Bletchley Park AI Summit and have been really engaged in kind of broader questions around how do we govern as democratic societies this technology? What are the institutions that we need to build? The AI safety institutes that are now around. So that's one thing. And the other thing is we try to be transparent about what we know and what we don't know. I think the preparedness framework that we and now other labs are doing, where we are really specific about the types of risks that we're seeing, that we're worried about. Also to try and get more third parties, basically creating a community that helps us figure out and think through all of these hard problems. And I think obviously it has sped up in the past couple of months, so I think it was really important to build these kind of foundational kind of artifacts, like model cards. There's another favorite document we put out that I think doesn't get enough attention. It's called the model spec.
Okay.
Sounds really technical, it isn't. It basically defines how we want these models to behave in an ideal scenario. And so I think the way we deal with it is we try to be as transparent as we can to bring societies with us as we advance the capabilities of these models. Do you feel like things are moving too fast in the AI space?
I think we're moving too fast on memes and probably too slow on things like cancer, to be honest. And that's partly because diffusion to the right places doesn't just happen automatically, right? You have to use different mechanisms, and something that I think you and I are both really passionate about is working with policymakers to set the right incentives. I mean, when you look at the speed at which we were able to discover COVID vaccines, that's because of something called an advanced market commitment, where governments commit to buying a certain amount of the vaccines once it's invented. And so I'm thinking, what can governments do to help speed up delivering that upside really quickly and equitably in this environment? I mean, I'm always asking, why aren't we building AI that is easily useful in hospital and schools on day one? And that's where I think Europe really has an advantage. I mean, you have entire economies that are run 60% by government. There's ways to do that in innovative models that we can all benefit from, for sure.
I agree. I think there is this role of not just public institutions, but institutions in general in really taking this technology and putting it to use so our societies are healthier, are more creative, and are safer. I feel is something that still isn't talked about enough, or I think we sometimes call it, I think we've called it the like messy middle of AI adoption.
Exactly.
Which is, I think we're now at this moment where there absolutely is a realization what this technology can do. There has been a rapid adoption curve on the consumer side.
Yes.
There is an adoption curve on the business side. But I think you and I are spending a lot of time talking to governments who run public institutions where we know traditionally for them to find a way to adopt this technology is incredibly hard, but I think is some of the most important adoption that we'll see over the next couple of years. So this is also why it's great to have the President of the European Commission with us.
Yeah, I know. Very
which I know you're all waiting for.
All right, the big one.
Okay.
Is AI going to take all our jobs, Sandro?
This is one I think you and I get at dinner parties all the time, and it's kind of hard to answer because you first need to gauge like what is your job and is and where are we going with that. Listen, I think a couple of years ago we released a paper called GPTs are GPTs, general purpose technologies, and I think this is something that people are now realizing is that we haven't built this technology for a specific vertical or for a specific job or even a specific task. These are models that can be used basically across any domain. And the way I sometimes describe it is we're sort of in the business of selling intelligence rather than just information. And I think if you look at what we do, what our work that we do that is economically valuable, a lot of it has to do with intelligence and creativity. And so I do think it is worth thinking through, and we're trying to do our best, kind of what is that impact going to be. But I believe quite strongly that humanity has always developed new tools and figured out a way to use these tools to create, to participate, to take care of each other. One of the things that bothered us a little bit about a year or 2 years ago is we didn't have good data. Like, there's a lot of stories out there to say, like, all of these jobs are being disrupted. One of the things two things we did was, one, we released a study to really look at what are people doing with these tools. It's a lot of coding, it's a lot of writing, and I think it's really important to have almost like real life updates on what people are doing. And the other thing is, of course, you know this, evals. So
Yes.
when you have a hard problem in AI, usually the answer is evaluations. So how is it that you can evaluate and measure whether these tools are actually taking on and disrupting our jobs? And so what we did is we looked at kind of all the jobs that the US labor statistics look at, and we looked at specific tasks. And we then are now doing a benchmark where we say, how good are the current models at doing the tasks that a job entails? Also with the point that I think our jobs are going to look different because the tasks are going to be different. And the most striking thing in that is not only that they are getting closer to being able to do these tasks, but often they're 100x faster than a human, which I also think the speed that these technologies introduce is sometimes underappreciated as well.
Well, completely. I mean, people forget all the time that engineering was a totally different kind of job before the advent of computing. So, I mean, should policymakers be worried about this transition of the 100x that you're talking about?
I think what I'm optimistic about is I think they're interested, excited, and also a little worried. And I think it's okay to be all of the above. It is an incredibly tough job to be running and leading a government right now at the moment. There's many challenges that they need to face, but I do feel conviction that in the conversations we're having with them, they are starting to think through what that could mean for their societies, from retraining, reskilling, from really rethinking what education and education systems looks like, from the ability to maybe reduce the cost of their healthcare system, which is a massive expenditure for most governments. So I think it's a mix of all of the above.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm next, and I hope this isn't triggering, because this is part of the thesis that you're writing, and we all need to encourage Dorothy to finish her thesis on that. But we're going to get a live update, which is, another question we get is bias in AI.
Yes.
Can it be fixed? Is it still a problem? How do we deal with that?
I mean, the thing that is different about bias in AI is that it's not just some software bug that you program and you can fix. Bias actually reflects a lot of deeper historical injustices about who's represented and who's excluded and whose imaginations get to be real when it comes to how we build these technologies. And so I think there has been a tendency to look just at perfecting data, but parity metrics just reflect the exact thing we have today, and it's really hard to project forward. So personally, I think you have to start with, what is the vision of the future that we want, which is really hard to agree on as a society, especially right now. And then think through how those are embedded in our systems and whose visions we want to make a reality. I mean, if you look at education, which you just mentioned as an example, there are so many different types of learners who are young, and how do we rethink how models can work to maybe work for people who are dyslexic, for example? Or, my mother taught me math very differently than I learned it in school because I wasn't understanding it, but not everybody has a parent who's that invested. So how do we make those types of things more available? I think rethinking models entirely are going to be important, rethinking how we do systems and infrastructure. So it's really not just the data. And it even comes to things like, where is capital allocated and who who do we want to let succeed or fail in AI, and who do we trust with our capital? That's something that I think you and I are both really attuned to and passionate about.
One of the things that we saw in the data, or that concerned us in the data we had about a year and a half ago, was that ChatGPT usage skewed male. And I think we've seen that in many of the new technologies, that it skews to a certain demographic. And what we saw in the latest data is it's completely at parity between male and female usage, which is great, and which has happened within the past 6 months. And also it skews a lot more heavily on low and middle income countries. So I think you're right that because this is not just information, but it's an intelligence and a tool that humans can put to use for what matters to them, I think there is a hope, and I'm not sure this touches in some way on the bias question, because I think if we have users of just a certain demographic, I think we're going to skew building the types of products that matter for this demographic. Absolutely. And I think it is so important that we make sure that this technology it's so easy to use. It is voice only. It can translate across languages. So one of the things I hope is that we can do that. But it sounds like you're describing it not as a technical problem, but a system level problem.
Oh, yeah.
Which where do we start? What are the things we should all start doing to make sure we're shepherding this technology in the right way going forward?
I mean, I think invest in builders who are more diverse and who have been historically underrepresented in these areas. I think it comes from the top down. I think people look at these problems differently, and especially when you look at women and the problems we're trying to address, or people for their local communities. I was just in South Africa, for example, and they look at where all tropical diseases begin, and that looks different in different populations. There's even different painkillers that work differently if you have genetic differences. I found out that paracetamol doesn't work in Japan recently. So it's important to have these variations actually so that the AI can perform better, right? It's just good to know these things, and you won't know that unless you're building locally. So that's something that I think everybody should be more invested in, to have more accurate services overall.
Okay.
All right, final question.
Okay.
And then I have a bonus. But if you could hard code one value into an AI system, what would it be?
I think I would do, maybe it's a little, I would do civic duty, and let me explain why. I think there is something about these systems, and it kind of dovetails to what we're talking about, in that we're seeing a lot of people putting this technology to use for things that they care about, for communities that they care about, for solving problems that they didn't think that they were able to solve on their own. And I do think if there is a value in these technologies that can support, encourage, nudge people to give them a sense that they actually have a lot more agency over what their world is going to look like going forward. I think there never has been a better time to be a person that is curious and that realizes that they have agency. And I think if we can hard code or make sure that the way we talk about this technology, the way we roll out these products, gives people a sense of empowerment and agency and nudges them to change things that they think needs changing, I think that's one that I would vote for.
Yeah, I mean, the way AI is going is not an inevitability. I think we often think that tech is so, there's a trajectory and nobody can stop it, but that's not true. I think we can shift it in different ways and work in public-private partnerships to do that, to make sure it reflects more of what society wants. And I'm really excited to see us both having a little bit of fun investing in those areas, from housing to healthcare to energy and more. But this is the other question. This is a bonus question.
Okay.
Do you think we're building something actually conscious here? Like, you're talking about agency. Is AI actually creative? Is it, does it have intent? All these things that make up consciousness.
I'll be quick, because also I see that we're running out of time, and I know there's a speaker or two you guys are all waiting for. No, I think these are and will continue to be tools that are at our disposal. I think they feel conscious. They feel intelligent, because I think they mimic and learn from human language. And I think the question of human language is something so intrinsic in who we are and how we speak and how we define the world, I think it's easy to get tricked into thinking that they're conscious and a creature.
Yeah, I mean, those are tools, not minds. And I actually think the most interesting thing is that how we use these tools actually reveals a lot more about us as a society than they do about machines. I mean, what we invest in shows what we value, what we fear, and very much what the future looks like that we actually want to build together. So to me, personally, the alignment problem is much less about AI's intent and much more about our own.
On that bombshell, gives you something to think about. Thank you all. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.